Well, if yeah.
Welcome everybody to tonight's Planning Control Committee, Thursday the 7th of September. Welcome to all councillors, welcome to all speakers, and welcome to all officers. Thank you very much. We'll start with any apologies, please. I'll take that as none. Item 2, any late items? Ian, any late items?
Just
Yeah, item 8.1 and 8.7 have been taken out of the meeting tonight. Item 3, declarations of interest. There's none for that. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of July 2023. We've all had a copy of that. Any comments? All moved by Councillor Bolton. Oh, yes, Councillor Kerr.
I raised with officers the conditions that were put in for, I can't remember which meeting, which one it was now, where we had asked for changes. I know it was Brentford Drive, where we had asked for the land levels to be looked at, but the condition in the decision notice says it refers to the plans as we saw them, and it seems a bit contradictory, so that was going to be looked at.
Thanks. Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kerr. I will look into that in the next few days, so thank you for that.
So take the minutes as read. Yep, thank you. Item 5, minutes of the meeting of the Conservation and Heritage Advisory Committee. Thank you very much. Take that as read and no objections. Take that as read. Item 6, appeal decisions. Is that you, Ian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as Councillor Bolton's, yes, nicely pointed out, six appeals and 6 dismissals. Happy to take any questions on them. There are some interesting inspectors' decisions, so I would look at land at the rear of 39A West Avenue in particular, together with land rear of 3 Troon Close. They are residential development proposals, and they talk about the lack of a 5-year housing land supply and the tilted balance position under paragraph 11D of the framework, so they're pretty useful. But yes, thank you to my team who dealt with all those and refused them under delegated powers and all got dismissed at appeal. So thank you very much, Chair.
Well done, team. Well done. Item 7, Development Control Performance Quarter 1.
Thanks again, Chair. It's in the usual format. Happy to take any questions. There is presently a government consultation out for looking at extra funding for the planning process, which Mr Clark has done a response to. That's scheduled for the closing date of the 11th of September. So we will be putting in a bid for extra monies to improve performance. But at the moment, I'm fairly happy with the way things are proceeding. And if you look at the comparisons under 4.14, I think we're doing pretty well given the constraints and the challenges of the process. So happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
There are none. Thank you very much. Item 8, applications to be considered. We have had a request from Councillor Ashby, just found you, to move item 8.3 to the first item. So, Julia, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's just one housekeeping matter on this report. The housing land supply figure quoted in section 6.2 of the report, which is page 148 on the second to last paragraph, should read 3.69, not 3.17, which is now an out-of-date figure. Thank you. The application relates to the former Derby Dance Academy building, which is a 2-storey property located at the junction of Peat Street and Linton Street. At present, the building is empty and permission is sought to convert it into 1 6-bedroom flat and multiple occupation on the first floor and 1 5-bedroom flat and multiple occupation on the ground floor. The overall number of bedrooms proposed have been reduced from 12 to 11 during the life of the application. Bedrooms are all single occupancy rooms, some with cooking facilities and all with en-suites. Bedroom sizes vary between 14.3 square metres and 16.4 square metres in floor area. Communal kitchens, living and dining space, cycle and bin storage are also proposed. No designated off-street parking is proposed in connection with the development. In total, we've received 11 objections following the consultation process. The issues raised within the objection letters include concerns about the number of HMOs in the area, highway concerns, including increased on-street parking and congestion issues, concerns about potential noise, disturbance and antisocial behaviour. Other concerns relate to the lack of services in the area, GPs, post offices, etc., and the fact that more family accommodation is needed. In terms of consultation responses, no objections have been received by the Housing Standards team in terms of the internal spaces provided. All bedrooms would have access to reasonable sized window openings which would provide light and outlook and would comply with the minimum floor space standards contained within the City Council's amenity and space guidance for houses and multiple occupation. Subject to conditions relating to the submission of a noise and contaminated land assessment, no objections have been raised by colleagues in the Environmental Protection team. There are no significant changes proposed to the exterior of the building in terms of extensions and alterations, and the proposal is considered to be acceptable in terms of its visual impact. The main objections raised within the neighbourhood letters relate to the potential impact on parking in the area. Although it's acknowledged that the scheme could potentially result in increased demand for on-street parking, the Highways Authority feels that it would be difficult to argue that the development would have an unacceptable impact on highway safety or result in a severe cumulative impact on the local highway network. It should be noted that the northern side of Linton Street is already subject to a residents-only parking restriction with permits required, which occupants of the proposed development would not be eligible for. In terms of the overall number of HMOs in the area, it is noted that there are very few licensed HMOs situated in the vicinity of the application site, and it would be therefore difficult to argue that the proposed change of use would result in an unacceptable proliferation of HMOs in the locality. Ultimately, the application site is located in an established residential area close to local amenities and public transport links, and is therefore considered to be a sustainable location for new residential development. The proposal would increase the variety of residential accommodation in the area and maximise the efficient use of the site, contributing to housing delivery in line with the intentions of SAVE Policy H13 and Policy CP6 of the Derby City Local Plan Part 1, a factor which should be given significant weight and taking into account the city's housing land supply position and the need to consider the tilted balance. Whilst the development could potentially give rise to some additional on-street parking, it is considered that it is unlikely to result in any demonstrable harm to highway safety or residential amenity. Any minor adverse effects attributable to the development would not significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefits in increasing the city's housing supply. The proposals, as amended, meet all of the Council's housing standards regarding room sizes, and a satisfactory quality of living accommodation is proposed. All other technical matters, such as noise and contaminated land, can be addressed through condition. Consideration is being given to the loss of the existing community facility, and the development is considered to be in line with the intentions of Policy CP21. Overall, it is considered that the relevant planning matters have been adequately addressed, and the proposal reasonably satisfies the requirements of the adopted policies of Derby City Local Plan Part 1 and the SAVE policies of the adopted City of Derby Local Plan Review. A recommendation is given to grant planning permission in line with Section 8 of the report. And you have two speakers on this application now, Chair, including Councillor Ashby. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie, for that presentation. We'll go for, can we go for Miss Hearn first, Councillor Ashby? Is that okay? Miss Hearn, you have 3 minutes. Ooh. As long as you press that button after I've pressed mine.
All right. I've lived on Linton Street for 19 years and I strongly object to this proposal. I have read the committee report and I feel like the decision has already been made, so I'm not sure how much weight will be given to what I have to say, but I felt it necessary to share my views verbally in the hope I can try and protect what is left of our area. I am speaking on behalf of many residents on the street who I've consulted with personally. Firstly, I believe the whole process has been flawed and perhaps even unlawful, as there was zero resident consultation with nothing on lampposts. We received a random note from the Labour team giving us 4 days to object. I'm certain had the process happened as actually stated, there would have been significantly more objections. I think the fact the process hasn't been followed needs to be addressed, as this was not fair on residents, and personally it should be restarted. I believe 11 objections in only 4 days from people who actually live in the area should be given a lot more weight than they already have, rather than a decision being made by people who probably haven't even visited the area. I note the Highways Agency have no objections, as they do not feel there'll be a major impact. However, as someone who lives meters from the dance studio, I can say this is not factual. I have submitted photos as evidence to this committee I hope you've had a chance to review. Linton Street is a quiet one-way street, however the street is notably deteriorated with parking concerns, antisocial behaviour, drug taking and littering. It's hard to turn into Peat Street from Utoxeter Road due to poor parking, potentially impacting on emergency services entering. Cars regularly speed around the area and go one wrong way up Linton Street. Parking access has got worse and worse. Delivery vehicles, emergency services and refuse trucks struggle to get down. I've personally had the fire service knock on my door before to ask me to move a car, which was not mine. Sorry, I've lost my flow. Cars park on the pavement, particularly on Peat Street, probably in fear of losing a wing mirror. I've had mine knocked off before. It causes an obstruction for anyone in a pushchair, a wheelchair, or mobility scooter, contravening Disability Discrimination Act. Yes, the dance studio generated some cars, but this was limited to a couple of nights a week, whereas a HMO would be all the time. How it could be suggested that the building would only generate 4 cars is absolutely ludicrous. I acknowledge that the proposal has been tweaked from 12 to 11, but this could still, in fact, mean up to 22 people at all times. Whoever makes these decisions needs to try living here instead of going off a census and research. Whilst I appreciate the efforts of the developer to include a bicycle storage and charging points, I'm very doubtful as to how this would discourage someone from having a car. If they have a car, they will continue to do so. I find it particularly naive of people to assume that people won't have a car due to their location. The old uni halls on Peat Street was turned into a refuge. We've got many HMOs which haven't been identified, and plus the new apartment block in town nearing completion. The studios seem extremely small. How 1 person or 2 people could live in there is beyond me. We're all crammed in. Why not make bigger flats for families which are more in demand? I guess this wouldn't be as profitable, but makes more sense. I see the studios won't be able to get a resident permit because these are now electronic. We cannot challenge them. They states there's plenty of facilities. This is rubbish. We don't have post office, surgery, and now we're having more unnecessary housing. Very nearly finished. The level of fly tipping and littering in total disregard for the area is noticeable. So although I appreciate it includes this planning interior rubbish area, I'm not confident this will be used. There are constantly bins left out on the streets, causing furthermore issues for access. Please don't ruin our area even further. I really hope you have listened to my words today. However, I fear you've already made your decision, but thank you for your time. And sorry I went over.
Thank you, Miss Hearn. It wasn't all that long, and you did really speak fast.
I did
didn't you?
speak fast,
So
sorry.
you did as well as you could.
Thank
yes,
you.
So that's it. Yeah. Are we going to pick up points on that first, or go to the next speaker?
I'll go to the next speaker.
Go to the next speaker. Councillor Ashby, and your magic string.
Thank you very much for allowing me to come to speak to support our residents in Abbey Ward on Linton Street. I would like to echo our resident from Linton Street's concerns regards parking, which was a very important point for all of the residents who objected. And indeed, I'm hugely concerned about the access for emergency vehicles should there be further parking. There could be at least another 11 cars, and when we as councillors have gone door knocking and have gone to look at the street, parking is a real issue there, contrary to what has been said. And even if people choose to walk to town because they live so close, they may need cars to go to work or college or wherever they go. So I think that is a naive suggestion. Abbey Ward already has too many HMOs. Within a stone's throw of Linton Street, there are many HMOs on the new Utoxeter Road and many others, registered and unregistered, as we all know. And we also know that in the city what we desperately need is family housing. Only today in the Health and Wellbeing Board, it was discussed the fact that there's more than 8,000 homeless people in temporary accommodation and bed and breakfast, many of whom are families who need family housing. So I would like the committee to go back to the developers and say, provide family housing and we will be happy. Size matters. There's a wonderful advert by Kingsway Roundabout saying size matters for car supermarkets. Here, size really does matter. And I really hope the council won't mind if I demonstrate what 15.3 square meters.
This is a new one on me, this is.
Agree to half of what the national recommendation is for housing to go ahead in our city to further degrade the appearance of the city and of housing and accommodation in the city. So I would ask you to reconsider your any decisions to accept this and to consider that this would not be enhancing to the city, to Linton Street, or to anybody who needs it. Thank you. Sorry, just saw the timer.
Thank you, Councillor Ashby. Would you mind switching your... Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Councillor Ashby. Any of the officers, Julie, want to come back? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just initially, in terms of the consultation that was carried out on the application, it was carried out in line with statutory requirements. The site notice was placed at the site on the 11th of May, and 11 neighbour notification letters were sent to properties which abut the application site in line with the statutory requirements. Just to come back in terms of sort of the living accommodation, the size of the units. I mean, during the life of the application, the layout of the ground floor was revised to include an additional living and dining space, which wasn't previously included in the scheme, to provide more communal space for occupants. We don't have anything set in stone in planning policy in terms of size requirements for HMOs. We tend to use the guidance that's contained in our housing standards colleagues' documents, and it complies with them. We've received no objections from our housing standards team, and obviously a separate licence will be required from them. So in terms of, whilst they are small, they're considered to be acceptable. We've got 2 communal kitchen areas, and obviously now the living dining space as well, which provides that additional communal space for occupants. In terms of it being converted to family housing, there's no there's nothing that in terms of demonstrable need for family housing that we can obviously hang it on. In terms of insisting it be family accommodation, I mean, the difficulty with this particular property is it has no outside space, no garden area, so potentially we wouldn't want to approve family accommodation there where there may be more of a requirement for that outdoor amenity space, so that would be the difficulty. In terms of parking issues, obviously the highways officer is here to answer any questions, but has looked at it in terms of highway safety issues and considers that it's acceptable whilst there is on-street parking in the vicinity. We also have to be mindful of the existing use of the building, and that could attract a certain level of parking requirements and could be used for alternative uses that in themselves could attract a certain level of parking that could be greater than the use proposed here. So I think hopefully I've covered everything. If there's anything else, let me know. The highways officer is obviously here to answer any questions specifically regarding highway safety. So.
Thanks, Julia. Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
No problem.
I mean, you know that this is an argument which comes up quite frequently. It's come up in member training related to planning committee. We've been through this, and you know, I try and sum up. It is a little complicated, but I suppose, you know, and I do have sympathy with residents. I think parking and that sort of frustration of the, you know, the problems that it causes to the amenity of the area is something which, you know, we have to deal with in, or my colleagues have to deal with in traffic management. But I think the problem is that the parking argument isn't supported by planning policy. And really, I think this issue about HIMOs generating, you know, 1 car per room isn't, it contradicts national statistics which have looked at the number of cars per room of particularly rented flats and HIMOs. And also the research between car ownership, household size and tenure. And I mean, by tenure, I mean those which are in private occupancy or those which are rented. So, unfortunately, it's always the advice from highways officers that we normally object to HIMOs, and that's in fact been tested a number of times where, you know, planning committee has obviously gone against advice and rejected some of these HIMOs. The inspectors always fall in the favour against those objections and allowed the HIMOs to come forward. In terms of planning policy, very quickly, you know, we have to look at it from the criteria which is set out in the National Planning Policy Framework. And it very simply, there's 3 main criteria. 1 is development in a sustainable location. HIMOs are generally within the outer ring road. You know, this one in particular is within 1 kilometre of the city centre. It's within 200 metres of a bus stop. So, you know, there's a high level of footways, you know, and people have easy access to those footways, cycling and public transport. So it's difficult to argue that these developments aren't in, or these HIMOs aren't in a sustainable location. Second criteria is that is related to safe and suitable access. This is an existing, many of the HIMOs, they're all existing properties, so access doesn't come into it. You know, they're not putting forward planning permission for a new access. And secondly, it's the third criteria is in terms of severity. Now, severity isn't defined, but it normally relates to capacity and congestion on the network. What it doesn't relate to is parking and the problems that parking caused. And the reason being is that the Highways Act very clearly states that no one actually has the right to leave private property on the highway, and that includes your car. Now that could cause a bit of juxtaposition between, in legal terms, because you can't turn down a development because there's a problem with parking on the highway, because you can't say that those people in the development don't have access or the rights to park on the highway because there's an existing problem, because those people that are causing that problem shouldn't be there in the first place, which is an important point, because then that leads into the way that we control parking and control our streets, which is through the Traffic Management Act. And, you know, the lady's pointing out there about emergency services not being able to get through. And I think if this sat in front of an inspector, then they'd say to us, well, as a highway authority, you've got the Traffic Management Act, which allows you to then control and manage your streets. If there's a problem, then you should be doing something about it through the Traffic Management Act. I know it doesn't always work out, and people often park on WO lines and do silly things, but, you know, we can't often control that behaviour. And I think if some fire services can't gain access, then they're within their rights to actually have that vehicle removed. So hopefully I've tried to explain that and the position that we have to take, and why, you know, for this and the other applications that are coming forward tonight, I think there's another 3 or 4 HIMOs, why we have to take the position that we do. And actually it's very difficult for us to object to them, even though my highways traffic management colleagues would probably kick me under the table for allowing these things to go ahead. But that's the position that we have to take, and that's the advice that I have to give committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that extensive explanation. Thank you very much. Yeah, committee. Sorry, Councillor Bonser.
Sorry. Yes, thanks, Chair. Just shifting the argument slightly away from the parking issue, I do have concerns here around us providing satisfactory living environments. And whilst Housing Standards said that they didn't have any objections, they did note that there was a significant departure from the technical housing standards. In fact, the square meterage, as demonstrated by Councillor Ashby, was between 14.6 and 15.2 metres squared, and the recommended minimum being 37 square metres. So we're not providing quality or satisfactory additional housing. You know, this is less than half of the size that is set out in the technical housing standards. So on that basis, this doesn't feel like an advantage. It doesn't feel like we're providing satisfactory living environments. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Julie, do you want to come back on that, please?
So just to say that the national space standards aren't formally adopted in our local plans, so obviously they are a guidance, and they relate to sort of whole units rather than houses and multiple occupations. So, I mean, again, we have nothing set in stone in terms of a requirement for space standards for HMOs, and the nearest thing that we have that we use as guidance is our housing standards document and the document that the licensing team use.
Thank you. Councillor Null.
Thank you, Chair. So, listening to some of the explanations, and reading the document, there's part that spoke about licensed HMOs. And if we, I want to believe that that phrase was carefully used. And so if we speak of licensed HMOs, does the reality on ground show that they are unlicensed HMOs and that somehow we're overlooking that fact? And in fact, when you speak to the residents, they will tell you that there are, in fact, many. And I don't think we should be looking at making the lives of residents more difficult, just so that we can say we've provided these houses. What we should do is look at the lived experiences of these residents, go to the ground, go to the communities, and rather than just look at what the letter, if I may say, of the law or of the regulation is, we look at the lived experiences and what's actually happening on ground. And so if there are more than 3 HMOs in reality, and if residents are finding it very difficult to either park on the streets or to even just move around, then we should go with that reality rather than just say, well, according to these regulations, because what we're doing is just looking at the letter of the law or of the regulation rather than looking at what people are going through. And once we start with that, what's next? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on that, Ian?
Well, just to say, Chair, that, yeah, I understand the sentiment, but clearly the development plan is a starting point for a planning decision, and Mr Teasdale will tell you that that's the starting point, and we have to take into account the development plan and all material planning considerations. So if we were to depart from that and make a decision based on something else, we would be finding ourselves exposed at appeal. So I would recommend that we start with the development plan, and Julie's outlined what the position is as regards space standards and the different space standards, and Andy Gibbard's explained the position on the highways safety severity element to it as well. So I'd start there, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Councillor Evans first, and then we've got Councillor Bolton and Councillor Kerr.
It's working. I'm not against HMOs per se. We need to house people as much as we can. However, what we're doing across the city in the already densely populated areas really does concern me. And this is a densely populated area. On 151, page 151, where it shows there's only a couple of HMOs, the map's not in the centre, so the site and Linton Street's not shown in the centre. And I need to know, and if the officers can do this now, I've had a quick look on Google Maps. I'd like to see how many HMOs in, say, a 250 metre radius, or say 250 metre radius around that site. Because then we get a true feel of what the site is. I don't believe that is a true depiction. Yeah. So really, the demographics is changing, and we're not, the quality of life of residents is changing. We're moving away from the family and the home units and the people who live together, and we're putting people in rabbit hutchers. I don't really want to be party to that. Thank you.
Councillor Bolt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am uncomfortable about this application for a variety of reasons, and listening to the public speaker and the ward councillors. I know the area very well. I used to live nearby, and it is, as Councillor Evans has just said, very densely populated. And this is just going to exacerbate the situation, in my view. I think it's over-intensification on the site, for whatever reason. Oh, I should think there's pounds signs involved there. The size of the living space, in my view, is of very poor quality. And as Councillor Ashby indicated to us earlier on in her presentation, if somebody has COVID, what happens then? I don't think it is a healthy environment, and therefore it will impact on health. There's an issue, a serious issue with parking around there, and I think this will just exacerbate the problem. In my view, I would like to move that we defer this application for more details on space standards and get that clearly defined, and also get some more qualification on the highway situation. I note, and I got a feeling that the highways officer was slightly uncomfortable delivering his report. I sense that he, well, I'll end it there. I think this application is, I was going to say unhealthy, but yes, it is unhealthy. It'll impact on people's lives. It will impact on the people who already live in the area, and I am not comfortable with it.
You don't want to, Steve, you don't have
the suggestion of the deferral, Stephen?
Well, I mean, members can speak on. Having said that, on the points in terms of the reasons, I think I can't necessarily see that officers would come back with any further information. I mean, Julie's given detail of the space standards, so I'm open to sort of suggestions by Julie whether there's any further information that she could actually provide if this was deferred for that base.
No, I mean, we've got nothing set in terms of planning policy that specifically asks for certain standards, so we only have guidance. And elsewhere we found it difficult when colleagues in licensing have considered the development to be acceptable to refuse it. So no, there's obviously nothing further I can offer in terms of guidance on standards because we don't have anything
So a deferral
set in stone. So
it would be correct to say a deferral wouldn't really be of any benefit for that purpose, would there?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, obviously we can ask them to reduce the number of rooms within the unit. We could liaise with the agents and see if they'll do that. Obviously they've reduced it by one in terms of the layout and looked at providing more communal spaces. That would be the only option.
Right, so there would be an option to go back and discuss that sort of...
potentially, if that's what councillors consider, that it may be acceptable on a reduced, in terms of a reduced number of bedrooms, potentially, yes, we could liaise with the agent.
So a deferral in terms of further information wouldn't be sort of, it wouldn't achieve anything, but a deferral in terms of sort of discussions further,
yeah,
given the concerns expressed by members might have a result.
Potentially, yeah.
And similarly on the highway point, I'm not sure whether the officer could add anything further to what he said tonight on that particular.
No, I don't think we you know, it wouldn't, our response wouldn't change. I think, you know, we've, you know, as I try to explain against planning policy and the Traffic Management Act and how that should be used, you know, I don't think that there's a route for us to object to it.
Thank you. So I think in terms of the suggestion to defer, I think if members are minded to defer for officers to discuss further with the applicant sort of amendments and see whether there's variations, that would be one option. But I'll leave that with yourselves to decide. Obviously, if you want to take a vote on that motion to defer, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Ian, do you just want to come in? You suggested you.
Yeah, I think that's the if that's the route you want to take, I think that's the one to pursue, because Julia negotiated down the original scheme from 12 to 11 units, and so I think exploring that, you know, is probably the best option, because yes, to confirm, there's nothing else to add on the space standards issue, given the absence of information in the development plan, and then what Andy has said, you know, is spelt out. That's the position from the Highway Authority. So I think that's probably your avenue.
I've got three people that got their hands up, three councillors, you should say. Just a moment, you. Would you be prepared to go with Councillor Bolton's motion rather than speak? Are you happy to do that? We'll go with Councillor Kerr first and Councillor Holmes. Is that okay?
Thank you. I would like this to remain a community building. I think that community buildings are important. The fact that nobody seems to want to use it as a community building means it's otherwise sitting there as an opportunity being missed. And we can't wish it back into a community building. We haven't got control over it. Just as we haven't got control over it to be accommodation for families, though, as the officer said, I wouldn't be happy to have a accommodation for a larger family without having some outside space. But my concern was, firstly, to confirm that these are single occupancy rooms. The plan that we've been shown shows lots of double beds. And I would prefer to have a single bed and more space in my room than a double bed if I was occupying a single room. And I think that would just like confirmation that we're not expecting those to be double rooms. And secondly, the ground floor has these big railings, grills over the windows. And I think they are really unpleasant. And I don't know whether they are going to be removed and if they can be conditioned to be removed, because houses along the street there don't all have grills on the ground floor. I don't see why these should have. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Could we put the map on, the map of the property design, technical drawing, rather than the street view? That's it. So I think Derby City Council and this committee should be quite firm in this, that we should be demanding quality accommodation of every size, whether it be small units to large properties in any development. For me, this does not reach even the minimum for me. It smacks, even with a reduction of one unit, of attempting to put profit over quality of life. And that's my personal view. I think that we should certainly look to go back and ask the applicant to think again about how many units are in here, to come up with a scheme which would still tick the boxes of commerciality and profitability, I would have thought, but also be a little bit more acceptable, putting aside some of the other arguments that members of the public and members of the committee have put forward in regards to parking and those other things, fundamentally for me, this just is not a quality proposal. I just can't support this. So I would certainly support a deferral to have discussions to see whether it can be improved. One other thing that I would actually mention is I think it's the first time I've ever asked this, because it's only just come to mind when I was just searching, because Leicester and Watford, for example, local authorities have either recently or in recent times rejected similar kind of proposals for not adhering to the national described space standards. Ceiling heights, have we checked that? Because there is a minimum ceiling heights as well. And I couldn't find it in the report. I'm sure as a dance studio, it probably has fairly high ceilings, but it's just something to check, because do we actually check and ask for evidence that the ceiling heights are going to adhere to the spec?
Yes, Ian, yep.
No, we wouldn't check on that. That would be a housing standards matter or something caught under the Building Act as regards habitation, but we wouldn't. We don't have a policy relative to that internal feature. And in terms of, sorry, Councillor Kerr, Condition 8, as recommended, controls the occupancy. 11 bedrooms, 11 persons, as printed.
Yeah, just to confirm, I did ask that question of the applicant, and yeah, they are intended to remove it. They've shown them as removed on the elevations. Obviously, there isn't a specific condition that requires that. We could potentially add that, but they have confirmed they would be removed, yeah.
Councillor Hassel, thanks for waiting.
Thank you. I've got a few concerns with this, and actually, you just touched on it. Obviously, we've got a square footage sort of number that we should work to. What's the cubic footage? Because that would include the height, which is important in this because we've got cooking facilities allowed in some of these rooms. I don't know whether extraction is allowed. I would also be very concerned about noise transfer of any cooking equipment, extraction into the neighbouring rooms. I don't think there's from the look of it, I don't think there's any allowance for sort of insulation, bagging or otherwise on the nibs of each of those rooms. There could be potentially just plasterboard walls with very little in the way of insulation in them. But again, from what the committee said, and I would second Councillor Bolton's proposal for a deferral. I think we need more detail. I think we should be aiming for a higher standard here. I understand that officers have to go to what the law says, but we are a committee, and we sort of allow these things or not, and we should be setting standards higher. That for me is not adequate. It's not right. I think there is potential fire risk in there with cooking in rooms as well, and adequate access and egress in the event of a fire. So I think there's a lot to be discussed with the applicant, and I certainly won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hassel. Do we want to move to Councillor Bolton's deferral? Councillor Nowers, Councillor Nowers, yeah, we have got a second. Councillor Nowers, yeah.
Can we reject it?
Yeah.
Totally.
As it's been moved for a deferral, I think we need to take a vote on that first. Right. And then if deferral doesn't go ahead, then obviously we'll then move to whether you grant it or refuse it.
Councillor Noah?
So can the option be either defer or reject?
I think we have to go for deferral first.
No, that's correct, Chair.
Yeah. So we've got a second. Councillor Bolton, you recommended deferral. Councillor Hassel, did you say you'd second that?
Can I just, a bit of point of clarification, if we did reject and it went to appeal, they could win on that plan, correct? Okay.
So, thank you. So, Councillor Hassel, second that, Stephen, got that. Yeah. So, all those in favour of deferral? Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up.
Right, okay, yeah.
That's 10 in favour of deferral, Chair.
Thank you. So that is carried. So it is a deferral. So
More work for Julia.
more work for you, Julie, if that's okay. Yes, I think it's wise. I think it's preferable. We've got a couple of smiling faces in the audience as well. So yes. So thank you for that, committee. Thank you very much. We now go to item 8.2 on your list, please, and that's Laura.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. This outline planning application relates to the Eagle Centre Market, Castle and Falcon Pub and the Derby Theatre and seeks to demolish these buildings and, in principle, redevelop the site. The redevelopment proposal is based on a housing-led master plan comprising of residential units, commercial floor space, along with a new public square and ancillary developments such as parking, servicing, landscaping and improved pedestrian connectivity. The application is an outline with all matters reserved. Therefore, matters such as landscaping, scale, access and external appearance will all be considered at later stages during the reserved matters. Before considering the main report, there are a few housekeeping items for your attention. Late items have been circulated this week, including letters of support from Derby University, Wavensmere developers, the Showcase Cinema and Russell Rigby. We welcome the proposed development and support the regeneration of the city centre, along with the improvement of the gateway location on this brownfield site. They also acknowledge the benefits that would arise from the proposal, including the substantial investment and creation of a better open space within the city centre. A further letter of objection from the Dean at Derby Cathedral has also been shared this week, which expresses concern about the impact of the proposal on the setting of Derby Cathedral and its cultural contribution to the history and future progress of the city. Comments from the applicant have also been shared, which refer to condition 35 as recommended within your report, which relates to air quality. And I can confirm that this has been shared with our environmental health colleagues who agreed to the amended condition. The applicant also wishes to draw your attention to their and the officer's consideration of the statute contained within section 66 and brackets 1 of the Planning Listed Building Conservation Act 1990. This is evidenced within their submission and within your report. This section of the Act seeks to ensure that the decision maker for any development which affects a listed building or its setting have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting or any features of special architectural or historical interest which it possesses. Furthermore, we have also received an Article 31 direction from the Department for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, which prevents the grant of permission without specific authorisation from that department. Please note that this doesn't change the recommendation set out within your report, as the application will still need to be referred to Secretary of State. Now to the main body of the report. This application, known as the Eagle Quarter Development, is in pure outline format, with all matters reserved, a point that some consultees have questioned throughout the application process. Members should consider if the application is acceptable for redevelopment within the land profile use of residential, commercial and ancillary uses as outlined on pages 41 to 42 of your reports. These quantums of uses are at maximum, and it is likely that any reduction in the scale of the proposed development would result in a reduction of the floor space created. The proposed development would seek to demolish the Eagle Centre Market, the Castle and Falcon Public House and the Derby Theatre. Policy CP21 recognises such uses as community facilities, and therefore their loss needs to be considered against the provisions of that policy. As detailed within your report, We are satisfied that the loss of the market and the public house are acceptable in policy terms, as provision is maintained elsewhere. However, there remains to be uncertainty around the theatre provision. Therefore, further consideration will need to be given to the loss of the theatre, and no demolition can take place until an alternative provision or relocation has taken place. This is secured by condition 19 within your reports. It is important to note the proposed development has been designed in a phased manner, and therefore the theatre could reasonably be retained and enhanced with an alternative setting and entrance. The application is accompanied by a suite of parameter plans which show the maximum limits of the development and how a development of this scale will be facilitated on this site. The reserve matters applications would need to broadly accord with these parameters, which include building heights, distances between the blocks, landscaped areas and the location of uses. The indicative layout comprises of a series of blocks, some of which will be interlinked and envelope the new pedestrian connections and new public square. These connections will improve pedestrian connectivity into and across the site, as shown within the master plan, as shown on page 43 of your report and as shown on screen now. The report before you comprehensively sets out the material considerations of the application and provides the full responses of consultees, and I do not wish to rehearse these in full, but draw your attention to certain key points. As the application is outline format, with all matters reserved, we are only considering at this stage the principle of redevelopment of the site. In determining this application, the decision maker needs to be mindful of the policy position, as the master plan is predominantly residential led and the council does not have a 5-year housing land supply. This position means that the decision maker needs to refer to paragraph 11D1 of the National Planning Policy Framework, and in particular footnote 7, when determining whether it provides any reasons within the framework that indicate why this application should be refused. As detailed within the report, the main footnote reason, in my opinion, is going to be impact of the proposal on heritage assets within the city centre and the cityscape. If you deem that the impacts of the proposal on heritage assets are not outweighed by the public benefits, and the National Planning Policy Framework would support the refusal of planning permission. However, if you deem that the public benefits do outweigh the harm to the heritage assets, including the World Heritage Site and its buffer zone, along with the Grade 1 cathedral, then the scheme must be determined in the tilted balance and accord with paragraph 11. D. This would require consideration of all the adverse impacts and all the benefits, so it would go wider than the heritage debate. However, once the balance is tilted, we must approve unless the adverse impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. With the policy position in mind, your attention is drawn to the main body of the report, which comprehensively sets out the consultation responses and the judgment in the officer appraisal. The application, with all matters reserved, has submitted sufficient assessments to show the proposed development, its maximum limit, how its maximum limits are defined within the submitted parameters, plans and building code. The application has generated support from Marketing Derby, the St Peter's and Cathedral Quarter bids and the Design Review Panel, amongst others. However, the application has also generated objection from historic colleagues, including Historic England, Conservation Area Advisory Committee, Council's Built Environment Officer and the Derwent Valley World Heritage Partnership and the World Heritage Panel, ICMOS. The objections raised are primarily concerned with the proposed scale of the development, as it's considered that it would have a harmful impact on the significance and setting of a number of highly graded heritage assets, including the cathedral and the outstanding universal value of the World Heritage Site. The OUV being its rural appearance, and that the proposal would urbanise its setting, eroding the rural OUV. The World Heritage Site sees the insertion of industrial establishments into a rural landscape that necessitated the construction of housing for workers in the mills, and the resulting settlements created an exceptional industrial landscape. The change from water to steam power in the 19th century moved the focus of the industry elsewhere, and thus the main attributes of this remarkable cultural landscape were arrested in time. Consultees offer little or no objection to the principle of the demolition of the current buildings or the principle of developing the site, but raise objection to the maximum scale of the proposed. Historic England conclude that proposal does not meet the requirements of the National Planning Policy Framework and would dramatically alter the character of the Derby cityscape, which forms part of the key setting of these heritage assets. This position is echoed by other heritage consultees. They are also of the opinion that there will be a cumulative negative impact on the heritage assets as a result of the recommendation to approve the redevelopment of the Bradshaw Way Retail Park, which was considered by members in June and is currently being reviewed by the Secretary of State. The harm to the heritage assets is considered to be less than substantial and therefore should be weighed in the balance with the public benefits arising as a result of the proposed development as set out in section 7.3 of your report. These benefits include housing, regeneration, placemaking, the economy and the environment. It's been previously agreed that the site could accommodate a tall building, albeit the proposal is somewhat taller than suggested in the tall building study. This study forms part of the local plan evidence base and provides a guiding rationale for tall building opportunities across the city centre. It is not adopt a policy of decision making. The application is accompanied by a suite of documents that consider the proposal's impact on the city's heritage assets, and it is agreed that there will be harm to these assets. However, this would be less than substantial harm in the NPPF terms, and when weighing in the balance the harm versus public benefits, the harm is considered to be outweighed by the significant benefits this proposal would bring forward. From a transport perspective, the application is accompanied by a transport assessment which has been comprehensively considered by colleagues in transport planning, with commentary set out in section 5.1 of your report. This assessment considers the maximum parameters and overall it is felt that there are no objections to the principle of the development and the maximum parameters of the development would not have a severe impact on the highway and it is acceptable in policy terms subject to conditions set out in your section 8 of your report. Furthermore, it should be noted that the application site is possibly the most sustainable development site within the city in close proximity to amenities, employment, different modes of travel such as the bus and train stations, along with links to the cycle and pedestrian networks. In terms of flood risk, the application site does lie within flood zones 2 and 3, meaning that the implications of developing in a high-risk flood location and providing safe egress and access for any residential development will need to be given careful consideration. However, given the outline nature of this application, these matters can be acceptably dealt with by condition and at reserved matter stage. Therefore, the proposal broadly accords with policy CP2. Matters relating to noise, air quality, contamination, ecology and biodiversity are being considered at the outline stage, but will need consideration in greater depth at the reserved matters stages and therefore can be dealt with by condition. As included within your report, it is my opinion and judgment that the overall public benefits of the proposal outweigh the identified less than substantial harm to heritage assets. There is a need to redefine the city centre, regenerating its purpose, growing its economic potential and improving the city centre's offer, and this scheme has the potential to secure a multitude of social, environmental and economic benefits. In my opinion, the benefits do outweigh the less than substantial harm as a result of their overarching and wide-reaching nature. There is no policy reason within the National Planning Policy Framework to refuse planning permission according to the tests within the NPPF contained within paragraph 2.202. And in my opinion, the proposal accords with paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework. Your recommendation is to be minded to grant planning permission and refer the application to the Secretary of State as outlined in section 8.1 of your report. And Chair, you have speakers.
Thank you, Laura, for that. Thank you very much. We have 3 speakers spread over 2 3-minute sections, I believe. So, Mr. Esquivias and Mrs. Bembedek.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Alberto Esquivias from Eurofund Group, representing the owners of Derbion. In response to the impacts of technology, social change and COVID, Derbion prepared a master plan to examine the key challenges that the centre and the city centre face. At the consultation, we received overwhelming encouragement from the local community when we presented our emerging proposals to them. Over 70% responded in support. The proposals have also received strong support from many local institutions, including the university, Barclay in Derby, and both St Peter's Quarter and Cathedral Quarter bits. Further to your support of our proposals at Bradshaw Way, we are excited by the prospect of transforming another underutilised and challenged city centre site into a new sustainable mixed-use neighbourhood, a place where people will want to live, work and enjoy themselves. We very much hope that you will also support what we are seeking to do at the Eagle Quarter and the benefits delivered by the proposal.
Hello, my name is Alison Van Bennick from Lichfields. I'd like to comment briefly on the comments raised in objection. Our team has spent time examining the effects of the proposal in conjunction with Historic England, Icomos and Derwent Valley Mills World Heritage Site. We fully acknowledge the importance of the important heritage asset and the weight that must be given to the desirability of preserving the setting of listed buildings and the conservation of heritage assets. But in view of the outcome of our extensive assessment work, we are disappointed these stakeholders aren't able to support our scheme. Our proposal seeks to respond to the Council's new vision for the city centre. In the terms of the assessment requirements of the NCPF, there will be some less than substantial harm, and it reflects the change in townscape of the city centre that is envisaged by planning policy and is already underway. The tallest elements of the proposal have been located to minimise their appearance in views from the conservation area and the cathedral, and due to the limited instances in which the prominence of the cathedral is affected, we believe Historic England has overstated the impact. The site is outside the World Heritage Site and outside the buffer zone, and much of the World Heritage Site's character derives from the relationship between historic industrial buildings and their rural landscape setting. Our proposal would not affect this relationship. Such as the importance of this designation, we have used recognised methodologies to examine the likely effects using an analysis of verified views. We concluded that there would not be any adverse effects. The redevelopment of this site will mean the wider townscape of this part of the city centre will change, and in our view, the change will be a very positive one overall. The proposals will create 107 permanent new jobs and will be a major investment of over 210 million in new homes and high quality public realm. If planning permission is granted, we'll continue to work closely with all those with an interest in the proposal to ensure it's of the highest quality and one which the city will be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Allen, please.
Oh, thank you. The proposed development is poorly designed, notably in its failure to respond to or relate to the distinctive character of the city. It could be anywhere. The height, scale and character of the proposed buildings is far in excess of anything else in Derby or envisioned in your local plan. It would detract from people's appreciation of a number of the principal buildings in the city, especially the cathedral, as well as from their appreciation and enjoyment of the character of areas such as Friargate and King Street. Both local and national planning policies for the protection of listed buildings, conservation areas and World Heritage Sites militate strongly against the approval of what is proposed. Although we are objecting to these proposals, Historic England recognises the potential of the site to accommodate sympathetically designed development of some scale. But, as always, a successful development would be one informed by a close and sympathetic knowledge and understanding of place. Finally, it is of great importance that the committee consider the advice of Icomos, the International Committee on Monuments and Sites, in full and reflect upon the wider concerns it raises as an advisor to UNESCO's World Heritage Committee regarding development management. We would note that if measures to safeguard the outstanding universal value of a World Heritage Site are unconvincing and threats are not addressed, the committee can place the site on the list of World Heritage in danger. We recommend refusal of these proposals. Derby, we believe, deserves better.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. Committee. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very much in favour of this application. I think it's an exciting opportunity to regenerate this particular area of the city centre that's become quite run down. To go through the different aspects of it, starting with the existing buildings, we have discussed this previously at a similar application in July, and I think this one will supersede that particular application. So I don't think there's an issue at all with the demolition of the market building or the pub. The market, whether we like it or not, has unfortunately suffered quite a long and lingering demise to the point where it has been closed now. So there doesn't seem to be a future for that particular use. Where my concern is with the theatre, and I don't want us to be in a position where we've lost that theatre facility before there's an alternative in place. I understand the condition that's been put in. Perhaps just like a little bit more reassurance that that is really watertight and there's no way that can be got around, so that we do make sure that we secure theatre provision for Derby, either there or on an alternative site, which I think there are some options for. So that condition for me does need to be extremely tight, and to make sure that we're not without a theatre. Personally, I don't have objections to tall buildings in the city centre. As I've said before, it is a city centre, and it's not surprising that there are tall buildings in city centres, as long as they are in the right location and they're of high quality. And the quality will be determined, and the detail of the application will be determined later on at the reserve matters stage. So I think concentrating this evening with thinking about the use, the location and the impact on the heritage assets in the city. I think the usage is appropriate. Mixed use, bringing more residential into the city centre is highly appropriate to meet our housing needs, to give people more choice in terms of where they choose to live, and to contribute to the economic revival of the city centre. It's good to see the green space and the public open space that is part of the application. I think that will enhance that particular area. In terms of the heritage assets, I'm struggling to see how they are impacting, to be honest. If we were talking about an application on Irongate, then I could absolutely understand what the concerns were, but this is a significant distance from the World Heritage Site, from the cathedral, from the silk mill, etc. And we've seen the impact on the skyline in some of the drawings, and to my mind, it's less than harmful. It's not going to impact those assets, in my opinion, in a harmful way. I'd just also just like to comment on ask a bit more about the input that the committee would have at the reserve matters stage, in terms of making sure that we have input into that, and we can ensure that the final details and the final designs come forward are of a high quality, because I think that all of the members of the committee would be very keen to have input into that, because this is such an important application, which will have an impact on the Skyline. So I'd just like a bit of reassurance about the role of the committee in the next stage of the process and being able to contribute to that. Weighing all of that up, I think the harm is less than substantial, and that the benefits do outweigh any potential harm that that may exist. So overall, Chair, I'm very supportive of this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Orson. Laura, do you want to come back on those two?
Yeah, certainly. In terms of the conditions that are in your report, they are abbreviated at this stage. Obviously, the full drafting will need to take place. I think it will be watertight in terms of the theatre provision. Obviously, if the applicant wants to come back and not provide the theatre, or there is an alternative provision, then they'll have to go through an appropriate application at that stage, which obviously the committee can have back at that time. So there's certainly sort of mechanisms in place to make sure that we don't lose the theatre provision. In terms of reserve matters, then yes, obviously once they're submitted to the authority, then they'll go through the full democratic process, so you'll have sight of those. They can be brought to committee if you want them to be determined at committee.
Thanks, Laura. Councillor Noah.
Thank you, Chair. So I have two concerns. Overall, I'm in favour of the application, just with two concerns. The first one, like Councillor Rosen has mentioned, is Derby Theatre. We know the important work it's doing in the city, and we know how it's really helped not just families, but also kids from underrepresented communities to get into the arts, to get into an appreciation of those arts as well. So taking Derby Theatre out of the picture without any firm commitment as to what the alternative place is, I think really is, it's not quite strategic, so we do need to think about that. My second concern, and I'm sure the highway team is probably knows where I'm going with this, is we have 875 flats with only 182 parking spaces in the city centre. A cursory walk around the city centre will show that everywhere is already choked full of cars, and I don't think 2 years ago, if we had thought that place will have parking issues, we would have thought it was possible, but we do have that now. Now, to bring in 875 flats, and let's just say half of that, which would be about 437, have families, people who would need to travel to different places. We're looking at an increase in the struggle for available parking spaces. Now, how do we mitigate against people having to suddenly fight over spaces in the city centre? So for me, that's a huge concern. Can the developers give an assurance or come back with plans on how to increase? Because I think 182 parking spaces for such a large number of residents, it's grossly inadequate. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the theatre one was covered in the first answer. I'm not stealing your thunder, Laura, on that one. Do you want to answer that one, or are we passing that one on to Andy?
I can defer to Andy, that's fine.
Andy, okay, coming back on that one.
Thank you, Chair. What I would say is that, I think considering the way that we're going in terms of climate change, that, having in particular high density housing with low number of cars is the direction that we should be going, and particularly in the city centre, as it sets out in the report, basically, you're in a location where everything is on your doorstep. You should be able to walk to most things that you need to gain access to. If you can't, then it's obviously a location where you've got access to the bus station, which is just opposite. It's literally a stone's throw away. The railway station, which is, a 15-minute walk away. So from that perspective, I think from a sustainability point of view, this is the right location to have that kind of development. What I will say in terms of parking, though, is that, you know, there are parking, basically the controls in the city centre are quite extensive, and I think the closest street to where actually there aren't any controls is about a mile away. And I think people who are going to live here are going to have to take a choice in terms of they're going to have to understand that, you know, there won't be spaces for their vehicles, and that, you know, that there are tight parking controls in place. So, you know, if they're going to bring a car, it's going to be quite inconvenient for them. And I think, you know, that in buying a property here, then that's a decision that they'll probably have to take up front. What I would suggest is providing more parking, but obviously then encourage more trips into the city centre, and that's not really something that we want to see, particularly from a sort of climate change and policy point of view. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Councillor Hassel, please.
Thank you, Chair. As I've said before on this application, it's a really exciting, transformational prospect for the city and a chance for the city to become city finally. But what I want to comment on is something really that this committee can't actually enact, but I want to say it anyway. This committee has passed proposals before that have never materialised in the city centre, and this is a really significant site. It's the core of our city, and really throughout all of the sort of press and information that has come from this application, I don't read anything that offers me absolute reassurance that the applicant will be the person that brings this out of the ground. Now, that is entirely their business. And if they wish to sell this site on with approved planning, that is also their business. But I don't want Derby to be the poor relation in that transaction. If this is approved, it needs to go ahead and it needs to happen. We need some reassurance that we will see spades in the ground at the appropriate time and action taken. Now, like I said, that's nothing this committee can really take action on. However, applicant is in the room. There's also a reporter in the room, and I would ask them to use that reporter wisely. Thank you, Chair.
You're setting up dates now. Thank you, Steve. Councillor Kerr first, and then it's Councillor Holmes. Thank you.
Thank you. I welcome additional green space in the city centre because we are short of it. But we've had a conversation earlier this evening about the need for green space for where people live. And we've got 875 residential units, which will be considerably in excess of 875 people, because those aren't all going to be single bed units. And they are going to be sharing that small amount of additional open space with people who are happening to walk through it because it's a city centre. And I just question whether or not we're actually creating an environment in which people will want to live. We learned from COVID how important open space is. The open space, the existing open space in that area is Bassage Rec, and that's the only significant open space for the whole of the Castle Ward development as well. They've got incidental open space within it, but that is the only significant big open space, and that's still a growing area with growing numbers of people. And my personal view is that this is significantly too intense in terms of accommodation, and that's on top of the proposals that were put in for Bradshaw Way. For me, the Bradshaw Way site is a more acceptable site than this. I think the proposals for this are too high. To talk about being acceptable for one high building is not the same thing as one high and several nearly as high buildings. And I feel that this is over-intensive in terms of the residential. I'm also concerned about the time frame. and why we picked this site. We had a planning application in, which we approved recently, on the reuse of the existing structure. We know, this year has shown us more than any previous year, that we have to deliver nationally, globally, locally on climate change. Building structures of this size out of steel and concrete is going to add to our carbon footprint, and they're asking to be able to do this for up to 10 years before they even put in the next application. By then, we want to be a zero carbon city, and this will not be something that they can build in zero carbon means, let alone operate it in zero carbon. So I personally believe that this application is at the wrong time. It's too intense. We've got too much other housing already being identified, housing opportunities within the city centre, and this will actually over-egg the city centre residential offer. We need to make sure that we've got the hierarchy of where we are building the housing correct. And this, for me, is a more important site. It's already in use. It's not derelict. It's got Derby Theatre there in action. And other people have spoken about the concern about potentially losing that. So I think the timing is wrong. If they want to do this, let's get the first development out of the way, show that they can actually develop on Bradshaw Way, and then we can know whether or not we've got enough public open space for a good quality of life for the people we are moving into the city centre environment. And we will also have the knowledge as to whether, as people's behaviours change over the coming years, we actually do still need more commercial space, which is what we have there at the moment, and we don't want to say goodbye to it while we think it might still be in use. And personally, I think the opportunity to bring people into the city centre with I can't remember what we called it last time, the visitor opportunity that we talked about before is actually far more valuable for a vibrant city centre than people who are somewhere up high, not coming and using the local facilities because they never come down the multiple flights of stairs or in the lift because they are remote from the city centre despite being living within it. So I'm afraid I don't think it's the right time, and I will not vote for this application.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Holmes, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's so many things that I've tried to make some notes here. So, parking concerns. I actually agree. This would be self-regulated in my view. You know, city centre, inherent restrictions in terms of parking, unlike many suburban areas and other residential settings where, you know, parking is always a concern, and it's something I've spoken about multiple times, either outside of this committee or on this committee. So I actually think that it will be self-regulating, and there is going to be obviously a premium for people who would park in the allocated spaces that will be created according to the report. So I'm not so concerned about that. I think that will resolve itself. Councillor Rawson is quite right in saying that. I agree with him actually that this supersedes, in my view, probably in his view as well, the previous plan, which in my opinion, was a very exciting proposal in terms of Darby Square and the leisure aspect of it and the design aspect of it that faced East Street. And I find that quite disappointing because I'm not so sure whether this is anywhere near as good as that proposal in terms of that side of the site. B2 block is my biggest concern at the moment, which is on East Street. For me, I would, and I'm getting into reserve matters, but I need to say this: the green space, the open space, absolutely great. However, I'd like to flip it around. I think we're losing opportunity here. It's always sort of blocking off rather than opening up. And B2 for me should be flipped around so that we've got some kind of square there, and you know, we can still have the same kind of units and commercial space and residential space, but we could actually design it a lot better. That's where my concern lies in terms of that, because I think that it will not enhance the ability to maximise Riverside and footfall if B2 is allowed to be designed in that way. That's my personal opinion. So that is something which I am concerned about. Certainly support city living. We're a very compact city. Said this many, many times over many, many years. You know, we can't expand past our boundary, but what we are seeing is urban extensions all over the place, and building on our green spaces via our neighbouring authorities, and they are that principle, in my view, is causing significant negative impacts. You know, I know that as a local resident and a local councillor in the area that's seen thousands of new homes in recent years and the impact that that's had. So I've always been a champion for city living, and to deliver that, we are going to have to build upwards. And Paul Clark will tell you, you know, we've had many friendly arguments about that in terms of how high things should be. You know, I think that there probably will be some pushback about just quite how high some of these proposals are. There may be some compromise there, it's the way it goes. But on that principle of building in the city centre, I think if we do accept that, we're going to have to accept fairly high buildings. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to deliver what we need in terms of housing. Yeah, reserve matters. So finally, Chair, if we agree tonight, then obviously we do lose quite a lot of control over the process. There has to be an in principle agreement as to whether we want to move forward with this as a committee. I get that, but a site of this significance, I do worry that we will then lose control over being able to steer and put our input into making it the best it can be. Going back to my comments about B2 block, I do worry that I wouldn't, as a committee member, have the influence to be able to try and change that via reserve matters, because it's almost a done deal at that point. And officers, if we do have it brought to committee, you know, the principle of it being agreed is already there, and we are tinkering around the edges, if you like. So I would certainly support, can't remember, was it Councillor Wilson that mentioned the reserve matters and having input into that? If it was, then that's fine. And I would support that, but I'm not totally sure whether the mechanism is there for us to be able to support this past this particular decision, whichever way we're going to make it. So, yeah. Sorry it's a little bit muddled, but there was quite a lot of aspects here on a very, very important application, which I think on balance I support, but with those concerns that I've raised, but also some of the things which I feel are not concerns really moving forward.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Prosser first, then Councillor Bonsey. Did put it under earlier.
Yeah, what an application. I mean, it just depends on what we see our city as and what we want to see our city as, really. I mean, it can be exciting to others and a complete disaster to others. So it's very difficult. As a heritage in this city, what do we want? We're not York, we're not Lincoln. A lot of our heritage has already been demolished. But do we want to compromise what we have left? Do we want to hide the cathedral in a sea of high-rise blocks? And while that's not what's happening exactly here, you only have to look at transformations in other cities around the world, and very quickly it becomes just that. So are we going for a high-rise city or not? Personally, I would rather we didn't. But that's my own opinion. I much prefer to see something that's smaller and more in keeping and easier to live with, in my opinion. Infrastructure. What are we doing about schools for this development? What are we doing about sewage for this development? Our sewage system in this city is already stretched beyond its reasonable capacity. We are dumping thousands and thousands of gallons of sewage into the river right near where I live and where my residents live. And it stinks. Elveston often stinks. And it stinks because we do not have the infrastructure in place to support what's going on here. Now, I know that's probably not a planning matter on some levels, but it really is a planning matter. It really matters to me. And the residents in Elveston who will smell the sewage from this development every day, after it's been done. Then we have the fire department. It's not, our fire department can't fight fires in a 29-storey block of flats. No fire department can effectively. You know, the buildings have to be designed to a level to try and mitigate that risk. But we can never mitigate that risk. Things will always happen. Nutters will always set fires. We can fight fires in small buildings. We can fight fires 6, 10 stories high. We can't fight fires in 29-storey blocks of flats. And it depends how comfortable you are with that risk. You know, do you want to take the risk of putting someone in a 29-storey flat when we can't get to them in an emergency? That's something that, to me, is also very important. Ghettos. I've lived all around the UK. I've seen these blocks of flats come down. The ones that we put up in the 60s and the 70s have been cheered as they've come down in the cities I've lived, in Glasgow, in Southampton, and other areas. It's important that we don't build ghettos that people don't want to live in. It would be very easy to build this and say how fantastic modern living is and how we want people to live in the city centre, and we want them to live without cars and we want them to walk to work. The reality is most of the work has moved out of the city into Pride Park and other successful areas. A lot of people can't walk to work because of the way we've built our cities, which is a mistake, an absolute mistake. But we don't want to build ghettos. And it's very possible, if you visited to some of the parts of Glasgow where these areas which were designed in modern standards in the 70s, absolute disaster. Nobody wants to live there. And they are really terrible places. You know, I've been there. Interesting in our report here, the tall building study that the council did said that this area should have a maximum of 5 stories. 5 stories. They're promoting 29. I quite like, you know, reasonably sized buildings. A 5-storey I have no problem with. Up to 10 stories would probably be acceptable in this location to me. But higher than that is drastically changing the very feeling of this city. Now, some people will love that. Some people hate it. Personally, I think going beyond the sort of 5 to 10 stories will transform Derby in such a way that it will have a negative impact. Because we're not a massive city. We're not London. We're not a high-rise city. I quite like the Jewellery Quarter in Birmingham because they're about 6 stories tall, 6 or 7. They're large flats, they're comfortable living, they're well looked after, there's concierges on the doors, they have parking underneath. They're a nice place to live. It wouldn't be my choice to live there, but as far as flats go, they're a nice place to live. Whereas, to me, building a 29-storey block of flats in Derby, we unfortunately risk building a ghetto. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Bonson.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions, really. But first to say that I'm generally in support of the principle of city regeneration. The impact on heritage assets seems to be directly related to the detail of the plan, and particularly the height of the development, and noting the block A2, 29 stories. Are we definitely committing tonight in the outline approval to agreeing to and committing to those 29 stories? You know, is that a definite possibility? And my second question really is that what is the rationale for the moving from 3 years to 10 years in terms of submitting the detailed plans? I think the devil is in the detail in this, really. It's such an important, significant site for the city. You know, for us to give that commitment, you know, we want to know that it's a quality development, and yeah, and I really do just want to understand, are we definitely committing to that 29 stories?
Laura? Okay.
Thank you. So there's, I suppose, a number of points, if I can pick up Councillor Bonson's points. In terms of the 29 stories and all the heights, they are maximum limits within the outline, so all matters are reserved. So when the reserve matters comes in, we will look at the heights of those buildings again. So effectively what you're agreeing to is a height of no more than 29 stories. It may be shorter when it comes in, but so in terms of it will be a maximum that you're agreeing to. The applicant has considered, obviously, seeking for a 10-year permission. A number of members tonight have raised the I suppose, the compatibility between the Eastern Gateway proposal and this proposal that's before us, the Eastern Gateway being the scheme that you saw last committee, which was the leisure facilities on the site. At this stage, we can't determine what elements are compatible between the two of those, whether any elements would be retained part of the Eastern Gateway and that leisure offer and this application. So the applicant wants to take time to consider what is best in terms of the retention of those facilities or bringing this scheme forward. Obviously, they've also got another scheme within the city, so it's looking at, whilst achieving our housing need, also looking at obviously not saturating in the development opportunities at that one time. So giving a slightly longer permission seems realistic in this sense. Okay, yeah.
Thanks a lot for that.
I suppose there was another, little bits and bobs to come back on. Obviously, questions were raised with regards to amenity space for residents. I know Councillor Kerr raised that. On page 44 of your report, obviously the parameters plans that you are agreeing to tonight, which will be secured by recommended condition 3, the amenity space of the development does look at providing public amenity space and private amenity space, so that those future residents of that scheme do have private amenity space that is contained. So I know Councillor Holmes, you raised the concern about block number 2. The amenity space behind that would actually be private amenity space for the residents of that development, so it wouldn't be looking to create a new frontage to East Street. Obviously, you create the linkages through the development site. So that is one of the reasons why block 2 is where it is, and obviously it would continue that frontage along East Street as well. So that's why it's designed in parameters terms as the way it is. Obviously, when reserve matters applications come in, they are all publicised, so obviously you can engage with that process. And obviously we can notify you when they come, when they do land, so you can be more involved in that determination process. I think Councillor Kay, you also raised concerns about intensification of the site, and obviously the number of residential units that is being proposed within the city centre. We do not have a 5-year housing supply, so there is a need for us to consider housing within the city, and also there is a quota that we're looking at to 2,200 units within the city centre. So obviously this application would go a long way to meeting those targets that we've got, or those requirements that we've got within our local plan. So there is a balance to be made there with regards to a housing need, and obviously a scheme like this that was proposing quite significant numbers within the city centre.
Chair, I'll come back on that, because it's clear from the desire for a 10-year opportunity on this site that we're not going to meet those 5-year demands by putting this in, because the timeframes are not compatible. And within that timeframe, we will have a new local plan, and we will be able to consider this site according to the new local plan, and not this, this site which is being not really considered and defined beyond what is there at the moment.
I think just to clarify, I think there's 2 points there in terms of your 5-year supply, but then we've also got a housing need that will be required. We will need to meet within the plan period. So the plan period is much longer than the 5-year housing supply. So obviously the 5-year is sort of a rolling, it changes year on year. Obviously the numbers have just increased from April 2022. So it's a sort of a rolling period, but obviously within the plan period will be much longer, hence within that 10-year period, and then this will be within that period. The 10-year planning permission.
We had Councillor Holmes and Councillor Bolton.
No, thank you very much for clarification. I do understand that there are benefits to creating an open space in a city environment for residents who live in that kind of accommodation. I get that. My point is still this, though, that had the previous Derby and Square application not come forward, then I probably wouldn't have such a problem with it. It's just that I feel that is I really like that idea, and I think that it would enhance East Street and that area very significantly, more so than keeping the massing and following the flow of East Street. I get that some people may say that is better design, but I'm thinking in the long term, this is going to be, whatever is put here is going to be here for at least 100 years, I would suggest, probably longer. And we have an opportunity to redesign this area of the city, this most important area, well, one of the not the most important area, but a very important area of the city. And I just want it to be the best it can be, and I just am cautious and not totally happy with that side of this proposal. So whilst it isn't on balance going to make me vote against it, I still want I want those concerns aired. I just think it can be better, and there may be a way to actually tweak that to provide some private space, but also provide something special for the city in East Street. And I keep going back to the fact that it can link through to the riverside, and that whole area can be transformed into an area everyone can be proud of and also enjoy.
Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was uncomfortable about this scheme initially, and actually having nearly an hour presentation and discussion. I think some of my anxiety have been resolved, but nevertheless, I think, well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the officer for the 100-page report. It took some reading at home, and I know a lot of work and time goes into it, so thank you to Laura and other officers who have obviously contributed. This is an important site in our city, and I think we as a planning committee take the responsibility of the future development of our city. And that's a big responsibility because clearly the developments will be there probably longer than we will be. The principle of the redevelopment of this site has got to be done. We've got to regenerate our city. We've got to look at the economic prospects. We've got to bring jobs. We've got to bring city centre living. I think they're the basics which are hopefully we will all agree with tonight and on any future applications. My initial reaction when reading it this afternoon at home was the impact of the height of the buildings, and I'm reassured by what Laura said. Be no more than 29 stories. Hopefully it won't be 20 stories. Again, I was anxious about that and the city street scene and the implications of that in our heritage. I make no bones about that, you know. But I was reassured with what Councillor Rawson said in that I was concerned about the cathedral quarter and the impact. But actually, Martin was right. If you stand on Cathedral Green and look over the other side of the city, yeah, it would have an impact, but perhaps not a detrimental one. But I take on board that is from a personal aspect. Everyone sees things differently, but I think what we need to do as a planning committee, and has quite rightly been said, if we agree the outline this evening, we need to have it back and look at the reserve matters in detail, because this is such an important site, and as a planning committee we are responsible for the development of the city. We need to look at this very, very carefully in the other implications that it brings. So really the reserve matters is really, really important to us, and we need to go through that with a fine-tooth comb. But I think my point of view has changed slightly, as I said in my opening remarks, from listening to people's views and listening to what the officers have explained to us. I can't vote against this scheme, but I'm very, very cautious about some aspects. But hopefully the officers will put our minds at rest when we have it back in the future.
Thank you. Ian, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, Laura's covered everything off very neatly, and thank you for the praise there, Councillor Bolton, on the report, because they are a big effort and a big responsibility. I know you've all expressed concern about the future involvement of committee, and we really do value your input because you're very experienced members, and you know, a theme of central government presently is that we've got to build beautiful and we've got to build better and we've got to build for the future. So I would expect that the developers in the room tonight, that whoever they engage with in the future, they look at quality and the impact and the deliverability and building something that's right for Derby. And in doing so, it would involve lots of partners. We've got design review panels. They exist locally and regionally, so we'd be looking at their expertise your expertise, and making sure that the right development is delivered. I mean, clearly, market circumstances may change. We don't know what may occur in the next few years, but what our ambition is to ensure that when applications do come in from the pre-application stage onwards, we have your involvement and the involvement of local people, local interest groups and everybody else, so that it's a proper process. And hopefully that will be taken forward, and the developers here, they'll take that away and ensure that they appoint the right project team at the right time. So hope that will allay some fears, Councillor Bolton.
Thank you. I think, Councillor Evans, did you put your hand up?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, listening to all the conversations tonight, a thought occurred to me. High-rise flats, we've tried them across the country about 60 years ago, really. Most of them got knocked down, and so there will be lessons learnt from that. Derby wasn't blighted by it 60 years ago. And tonight, if we let this go through, are we, as custodians, because we're in that position tonight, are we going to allow that, where we allow these huge buildings to take over our city? It's a big question, that is, that each of us need to be aware of. And that legacy could be there long after we've gone. I am in agreement, really, with the Dean of Derby and what he states, really, and permanently altering the skyline. What did he say? The proposal to build up to 29 stories would significantly and permanently change the skyline with the scale and dominance which is proposed. And that alone speaks volumes. We've got to understand, if we do this, we are permanently going to change it, the city centre. That's it. I know we've got to bow into the pressure of demand, but how did our forefathers go on with that? Is that all we can do, is build huge buildings? And is that sustainable? I live in a high-rise flat. Where's my vegetable plot? How do I grow my own vegetables? I don't do it. I'm beholden to the system. I'm stuck in it. I'm in my little cell. Really, I think this could cause long-term detrimental changes. I do agree with Councillor Prosser. We want this site developed, and I certainly welcome redevelopment of it, but something 5 stories or so, I don't think there'd be a problem. But to change it on this scale is huge, and I certainly can't support that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that's everybody has spoken. Just my little input on this, and I'm going to agree with Councillor Bolton. I know you won't. I don't tend to agree with it at times, do I? But I will do on this one. Looking at those street scenes has allayed my fears on this. And I think how they've put that, the large block at the end of Traffic Street, it tends to slope up going from East Street. And those street scenes has convinced me really on this one, and that's my personal view on this one as well. So I do appreciate everybody's views on this, and I think it's been really good discussion, and we've gone on for over an hour on this one, Ian. So yeah. So would somebody like to move to the votes? Councillor Hassel, do we have a seconder? Councillor KMM, I'll call him Morgan McGee, and he's got too long a name. All those in favour?
Nine in favour, Chair.
All those against?
Three against, Chair.
Thank you very much. 3 against, so that is approved. So thank you very much, everybody, for that.
Chair,
Goes to the Secretary of State now, that does, yes.
Can I have a 2-minute call of nature break, please?
I was just going to ask one for myself, to be quite honest. I've got my legs crossed under it. So yes, call of nature break, and then we'll go on to item 8.4. So thank you very much. I'm assuming everyone's back. Can I just say, whoever invented these screens in front of us, so us here don't have to go like this all the time. It's great, because I would have had a crick in my neck tonight after all that to and from.
Yeah, but you've got one and we haven't, though, you see.
These are great,
We've got the cheap seats that don't get that.
These are really good, these are. You don't know what we're watching, though, but that's it. So we'll move on now to item 8.4, 109 Brighton Road. Rory.
Thank you, Chair. No housekeeping items for this one, which is an application relating to 109 Brighton Road, which is a two-storey terraced house currently in use as a house in multiple occupation for 6 people. A certificate of lawfulness was for the use of the site as an HMO in the C4 use class was issued in 2021. Permission is now sought for a change of use of the site to an HMO to house 8 people by increasing the occupancy of each of the 2 first-floor bedrooms for the accommodation of 2 people each. The application has been amended to alter the layout of the shared kitchen on the ground floor, following comments from the Council's Housing Standards team. 5 objections, including 1 each from Councillors Cuss and Graves, have been received and are summarised in your report, focusing on parking and amenity issues. No objection is raised by the Highway Authority or the Council's Housing Standards team. Our opinion is that the proposed increase in the residential use of the site by an extra 2 people is acceptable in this case. The use of the site as an HMO has been established as lawful, and the proposed living environments are considered to meet the relevant tests in local and national policy. It is possible that levels of activity and parking pressure in and around the site would increase, but that this increase is likely to be minimal, and given that the tilted balance is engaged, could not be said to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of even a small increase in residential accommodation. In addition to the standard conditions are recommended on bin and bike storage, landscaping and maintenance of the rear garden, and a management condition limiting the occupancy of the building to 8 people. Our recommendation is to approve the application, and you should have Councillor Cuss to speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Rory. Yes, we also have Mr. Burnett as well. Yes, so we'll go for Mr. Burnett first, if that's okay. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Well, I live on Brighton Road, just up from that, where the shop is. We've been there since 2008, and opposite us is a row of 10 family homes, which 8 of them are actually now HMOs. There's 1 family home left. And it's going to be soon be called BHMO Road rather than Brighton Road. The fact is that they've even set up a shop at the bottom of Brighton Road for Our Share Heroes. It's absolutely crippling our community. The parking aspect is horrendous. I actually work for East Midlands Ambulance Service, and if I ever get a job round there, I will go a totally different way because I know what the traffic and the cars will be like. The fact is that they do all these assessments with the traffic management, and yeah, it's all very well until someone's in that position and they won't be able to get an ambulance or fire engine to save their life. The parking, it's the fact that, you know, it's okay because it's not affecting the people who met these planning permissions. Again, we've gone over HMOs tonight, and, you know, now they're trying to turn them into double bedrooms. I mean, the property has been, there's been nobody living in it because there was a fire there a few years ago where tragically a gentleman died. No one's been living in it, and it's actually been finished. And as many others in Brighton Road along where we live, planning permission has been put in. They're building them, they're finishing them before even planning permission's finished. And then the council come along and just give a big tick, yeah, that's fine. But we are absolutely fed up to our back teeth. We have actually got 145 signatures which have been submitted. We've got an online petition, which it's only been live a few days. I think we've got about 30-something signatures. And we are absolutely at our wits' end with these HMOs. We've got nothing against them, but I do believe there's something at Section 4 that's come into play. Apparently that Nottingham, is that right? Yeah, yes, right, Article 4, which Nottingham look at, which consider a lot more factors. Derby's approved it, but it's still waiting to go through. And even now, some families just moved out opposite us, and that has been sold to another investor. So that will mean all that strip will be all HMOs. And the fact is that Derby is struggling for family housing. You're ripping the heart out of a community. And I don't know where it's going to stop, because it's just getting ridiculous. I mean, one of our neighbours, when they had building either side, actually ended up in hospital because of the stress. We've had car windmills knocked off, we've had boulders dropped on our cars, but no consideration at all. And I just think it just needs to be looked at properly, rather than just saying, yeah, tick the box, that's it. And especially when people have started building, they should be made to knock it down. If they've gone against the planning permissions, they should be made to knock it down. Yeah, sorry if I've gone on a bit.
No, I'll let you go off, because you were in the middle of a paragraph.
Yeah,
as such, so yes, so I do appreciate that, yeah. Rory, do you want to come back on any of those, and Stephen on the Article 4 or Ian on the Article 4?
Yes, thank you. Just on the concentration of HMOs, at the moment we don't have a specific policy on HMOs, and we don't have an Article 4. So the policy we have to apply on the more general amenity policies on quality of living environment and the effect that an HMO, in this case, an addition of 2 people into an existing HMO would have on the surrounding environment, and whether that effect would be unacceptable in planning terms.
Yeah, in terms of the Article 4, Chair, as your successor was very keen on the issue, and there's a council motion to look into it and to explore essentially the evidence base. We need the evidence in wards across the city to move this. And an Article 4 would require applications for planning permission. That's what it would require. It wouldn't preclude or stop the creation of HMOs. It would require the planning process to essentially intervene. But as I say, that process is ongoing. It's quite a large, lengthy process, and other authorities like Nottingham City and others have gone through fairly extensive evidence-based programmes that they need to satisfy the Secretary of State, because the government across various areas like prior notifications have said that Article 4s shouldn't really be exercised, so you have to go through quite a big process, Chair. And in the meantime, as Rory indicates, we have to determine them, in the general policies that we have and spelt out in your report. Thank you.
Councillor Cuss, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I would like the committee to object this application for many reasons, including the increased demand for on-street parking. There are already a high demand for on-street parking in the area due to many houses on Brighton Road having no parking facilities, and that Brighton Road already has a high number of HMOs in a small concentrated area. The report still uses an old research for their justification on street parking, the Residential Car Parking Research Report from 2007. Since 2007, car ownership per household has increased, and in practice, the 0.3 vehicles per person in a HMO is likely to be significantly higher. With the increased car traffic and parked cars, adds additional problems with congestion in the area. If I can draw everyone's attention to the map on page 163, the number of HMOs in a small area has rapidly increased over the years, with more developments already in progress on the street. The houses on Brighton Road seems to be changing from family homes to HMOs at a fast pace. HMOs can be good type of housing, provided it is in the right location. However, in the wrong location, and high number of HMOs concentrated in one area can have a negative impact on the community. Last week, a petition with 145 signed names from Brighton Road and the surrounding areas was handed into the council. The petition was against any more HMOs on Brighton Road. Please consider the local residents that will be affected by this application. 145 people show the meaningful voice of the community on Brighton Road. I'd like to remind the committee last year a motion was passed for Derby to implement Article 4 directive to have a greater control over HMOs. Due to HMOs being highly concentrated in certain places like Brighton Road, this was supported by all parties. On that basis, the application should not be passed, as How can we ask the Secretary of State to approve Article 4 directive due to high number of HMOs being concentrated in a small area, yet we're still approving them when we have the opportunity to object them? I would like to add that I hope the Article 4 directive is acted upon at the earliest opportunity, as once it has been approved by Cabinet, an Article 4 directive will come into effect 12 months later, provided that the Secretary of State has accepted the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coss. Who would like to speak on that one, officer-wise? Is there any comeback on that one?
Not from me, Chair. Andy Gibbard, just to reiterate.
Andy, do you want to just come in slightly on the traffic thinking?
Yeah, I'll keep it short this time. Thank you, Chair. It basically goes back to those comments I made previously on the Linton Street application about how we have to consider these applications, and parking isn't one of them. As I said before, it's something which, you know, if this went in front of an inspector, they'd basically say as a highway authority we'd have to deal with through a Traffic Management Act, which is, you know, controlling the street, putting in resident parking schemes, etc. So from that perspective, I've not really got much more to add to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Any comments from any of the... Councillor Evans, did you put your hand up? I thought you did. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, okay. I'll start again, and it's similar to the Linton Street one, this. The map showing the ones in the area, the HMOs in the immediate vicinity. Can we have that zoomed out again, and to include the whole of Brighton Road, which will take it up towards Y Street, Lincoln Avenue on London Road, so that we can see in that area how many there are, so we can see the change that's taking place. Yeah, and also you're only showing the licensed ones. There's ones there that are unlicensed, and are just blocks of flats and so on. There's the one opposite on Burnaby Street on that corner. That's a big block of flats. So we've already got more than just the HMOs that show up on there. It doesn't truly depict it. We need to be aware of that. Again, it's been said before, but it's the family homes, isn't it? We're destroying people's family homes, and we're putting in place in old Edwardian and Victorian houses, smaller units with people living together. Do we really want to be doing this in this extremely densely populated area like Linton Street? So where we know it's already densely populated, I know it's only 2 more, but it's a change, isn't it? And if we accept this 2 more, where we know 6 that can do that, then we're allowing it in, and then everyone will be doing it. They'll all be changing to 8. And yes, so we will need that Article 4, which was passed by all the parties. So we need to be getting it implemented ASAP, really, without delay, to protect the residents in these areas. It's not fair. I grew up around this area. I spent over a decade living just off Brighton Road, and I remember the community spirit there in the 1970s. I can remember it well. And when you see the heart ripped out of it like this, it does mean, again, we've got to stop it. We've got to say enough is enough now. I'm not saying no more HMOs. I agree we need them, and we need these, but they've got to be the right building in the right place, in the right context, and we don't have that here at all. Kirk mentioned that we've got this petition, I didn't know, with 145 signatures on. You know, do we know better than all these people then, that we're going to just say, you know, we know better than you? And I know there's some extremely pressures on to find housing. I do understand that, but most of us here, would we want to live in next to something like this? Would we? We probably wouldn't, would we? So why should we blight others with it? So that's all I've got to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Kerr.
Unlike the Linton Street one, this is already a house of multiple occupation, and the request is not to start it, but to enable 2 couples to live together rather than potentially to be living in separate single rooms in different HMOs. And if I were a single person in one of those relationships, or a person in one of those relationships, and I could move in with my partner, then I would do that. It would save money. It would mean that I had a better quality of life. And that is what this is enabling people to do. It may bring another car in, and that is an issue, but at least in this case, we're able to start with conditions that are saying we're going to have cycle and bin storage. We're going to have a bit more control over what's happening in that area. There's a condition, I think, also on the landscaping, and to say we need some outdoor amenity space so that people will have a bit of a better life, and the existing people in that property will have a bit of a better life than they are having at the moment, when there's no control over what's happening in probably a fairly overgrown back garden from what it looks like. So I accept it's a real challenge, and it is a challenge for a community where there are as many HMOs in the general vicinity, but this isn't a new one. This is just enabling a slightly better quality potentially for a few people.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Anybody else like to speak? No, I'm sorry you can't. It's unfortunate. I do apologise, but you can't. You can't, Councillor Evans. You've already had your go. Would somebody like to move to the vote, please? Councillor Newitt. Seconder. Councillor Kerr. All those in favour of this application?
Three in favour, Chair.
3 in favour. Can you just keep your hands up, please, while we just count you again? Yeah, 3 in favour. All those against?
7 against.
7 against.
Chair.
7 against. So that application is rejected.
Chair, you have to sort of take the vote on reasons for refusal. Somebody has to formulate reasons for refusal, and you need to vote them.
Okay, so reasons for refusal then, folks. Councillor Evans.
Chair, we are going to be bringing in Article 4 if it's accepted by central government. We can't use that as a reason. Okay. There is... Chair, could we say we've got is it a 33% increase in occupancy in that dwelling, going from 6 to 8, and also the debt. Well, it's going to be more people, isn't it? So it's adding to a problem that we've already got, a huge problem. Okay, we've got noisy behaviour there. We have well, I don't know. The residents have spoken to us about it. You know, we've had things where wheelie bins left out. General antisocial behaviour is definitely a factor.
Each application is unique, isn't it? And we really can't say like this street or like that street. And we do need to have a reason and not reach. I think what we're doing right now is reaching. If we don't have a reason, we don't have a reason. And sad as it may seem, we do need to go with that. But if you don't have a reason, yeah, that's what, so I'm saying that we don't have there's no reason to refuse, and surely we can see that.
Have you come up with something?
I believe the property's empty. And because, is there anything that can be detrimental because they've started the building works to convert it without planning permission? I know you can get retrospective, Stephen.
It's just an over.
Apologies. Yeah, the fact is, the base is that the property may be used as a HIMO for up to 6 people at present. So you've got to come up with a reason why 2 extra people actually sharing rooms, not actually additional rooms, they're sharing rooms in that property, will be detrimental to the area. I mean, that's what you've got to come up to. You know, will it increase parking? Will it not? I mean, so you mentioned antisocial behaviour, but you know, sort of, I'm not sure whether there's any evidence being presented of that in this particular case. And I think that's also, I think any inspector is likely to think that that's assuming things which are based on no real basis. I mean, so I think there's always a difficulty in terms of these situations where you've got such a little sort of leeway in terms of the impact. That's a slight problem in coming up with reasons. And I appreciate the problem, but you do need to come up with a reason.
Councillor Rawson and Councillor Prosser.
Yeah, thank you. Could I suggest an over-intensification of houses in multiple occupation in that particular area, given the number of HMOs that we've seen as in that small area? That's one of the reasons that swayed me. Loss of general amenity to residents in that particular area, caused by additional numbers of people living in the property, and parking issues caused by potentially additional car journeys and vehicles in the street.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, that's. You want to take
Are you okay with that, Tim, or do you want to add anything?
I mean, it's basically what I was going to say. It is a massive over-intensification in that area. The map shows the registered HMOs in the area. You know, the resident described the real situation, because obviously there's 3 times as many unregistered as there are registered, licensed, sorry, not registered. So we have many, many more HMOs in that area, and we have lost that whole community already. And it might only be a small change here, going from the numbers. But even that little small change is now, you know, detrimental to an area that's already over-intensified.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, my speech is still on. Sorry, my apologies. I do forget. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Robertson, sort of for the reasons. Do you want to put that to the vote, sort of, as regards the for rejecting or refusing the application?
Yes. The reasons for as outlined by Councillor Rawson. So all those against the application.
All those supporting a refusal.
Supporting refusal, yes. Supporting the refusal, yes.
Seven in favour, Chair.
7 in favour. All those against supporting the refusal.
Thank you, Chair.
That's
3 against, Chair.
3.
Thank you.
We need somebody for the appeal, Chair.
We need someone for the appeal. Councillor Rawson or Councillor Evans? Councillor Evans, do you want to go for the appeal? Councillor Evans, I think. I've nominated you. Is that okay? No problem. So that application is refused. So thank you very much, everybody, for that. Thank you, those, for turning up as well. And thank you for keeping quiet. We'll move on to item 8.6. 26 Highfield Road. Rory, you again, please. Thank you.
Thank you. One housekeeping item. Members should have received additional representations from the applicant's agent, including photos of the work undertaken so far, which was circulated yesterday. To summarise the main reports, the application relates to 26 Highfield Road and is an application to change the use of the site from a single household dwelling to an HMO for 8 occupants, and a single-storey rear extension was refused by this committee in November last year. Refusal was justified on amenity grounds relating to increased activity, disturbance and parking pressure from the proposed use of the site. Since then, separate certificates of lawfulness have been issued for the use of the site as a 6-person HMO and a single-storey rear extension to the building, both using the site's permitted development rights. These constitute a particularly strong fallback position in our opinion and establish the status of the site for use as an HMO in the C4 use class as lawful. This application seeks permission for the use of the site as an HMO housing 8 occupants in 8 bedrooms by a conversion of the existing ground floor living room and dining room to bedrooms. 15 objections, including 1 each from councillors Martin, Repton and Swan, have been received and are summarised in your report, but focus on parking, amenity and character issues. No objection is raised by the Highway Authority or the Council's Housing Standards team. The reasons why we think it is acceptable are very similar to the last one, so if I repeat myself, please forgive me. Our opinion is that the proposed intensification of the existing residential use of the site, an extra 2 people, is acceptable in this case. The use of the site as an HMO has been established as lawful. The house and garden are relatively large, and the proposed living environments meet the relevant tests in local and national policy. It is possible that levels of activity and parking pressure around the site would increase, but that this increase is likely to be minimal, and given that the tilted balances engaged could not be said to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of even a small increase in residential accommodation. Standard conditions, cycle and bin storage, and a management condition limiting the occupancy of the building to 8 people are recommended in the report. Our recommendation is to approve the application, and you should have 2 speakers.
Thanks, Rory. Ms Dukes, you have your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today. My name is Ellie Dukes and I'm a senior planner at RGP. We are agents for this application, appointed by the applicant, who is an experienced, responsible landlord. I must start by fully endorsing the robust and very thorough recommendation to approve this application. Number 26 Highfield Road is a semi-detached 2.5-storey HMO. It has been transformed by our client, who purchased the property in a dilapidated state. For the avoidance of all doubt, the principle of a HMO in this building is already established and is operating with 6 bedrooms occupied. It is entirely lawful in planning terms. The proposals only involve a very modest intensification of the use of the large property with an addition of 2 bedrooms. My client is aiming this property at professionals who are looking for a high-quality living environment at an affordable price. The demand for smaller units within the city is high within the city, and this HMO helps provide housing choice in a location which is a convenient distance from the city centre with its range of amenities and nearby open spaces. Highfield Road already contains a mix of dwellings, including flats, and the property is large and all of the bedrooms are equipped with an ensuite bathroom. It provides a spacious main kitchen and communal living space at ground floor with an additional smaller kitchen on the first floor. External cycle and bin storage is provided within the spacious rear garden. My client has also been liaising closely with the Derby City Council's Housing Standard team, which manages the licensing of HMOs and ensures housing quality is maintained. They have confirmed that the arrangements are of a good standard and are suitable for let. Prior to this meeting, I have shared some photographs with the committee that demonstrate the high quality and modern living environment that my client has already achieved. I hope this brings some comfort to members, demonstrating that the proposals will not be detrimental to the street scene or local area, whilst also providing attractive internal spaces for residents. I emphasise that the planning judgment here is very narrow and affects only the additional 2 bedrooms over the lawful operating position which currently exists. Therefore, as noted by your officer in their robust report, the proposal is considered to be acceptable with regard to character, amenity and highway safety. It's considered that all planning matters are resolved. The benefits arising from this proposal should be given positive weight. I commend the recommendation before you and respectfully request that you resolve to approve this application for an increase of 2 bedrooms within the HMO with appropriate conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. This planning application represents the second part of a strategy on the part of the developer to achieve what they want out of 26 Highfield Road, without regard for the views of local residents or indeed of the planning committee. In November 2022, the planning committee refused the developer's application to make number 26 an 8-bedroom HMO, and I will read out the reasons given. In the opinion of the local planning authority, the proposal would have a detrimental impact on the character of the immediate area and the residential amenities enjoyed by existing neighbours in terms of increased activities, associated disturbance, and the over-intensification of the use of the dwelling house. The proposal would also serve to increase pressure on existing on-street parking levels on surrounding highways, which would also, as a result, detrimentally impact on neighbouring amenities. The proposal is therefore contrary to Save Policy GD5 of the adopted City of Derby Local Plan Review and the overarching guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework, which seeks to protect the amenities of individuals who are affected by the development of land and buildings. So what has happened since last November? Nothing. The developer, rather than appeal, decided on a strategy to develop the house into a 6-person HMO anyway, no planning consent needed, with alterations that enable the 8-unit application later. And this is that application. Just another 2 is a smokescreen for the fact that the developer wanted 8 and wants to ignore the previous planning committee, ignore local people and get 8. Keep trying and wear them down is the strategy, so that we now have 15 submitted objections compared to the over 30 we had in November. But the same number of local people have contacted me with their concerns, all of which are well known to the committee and councillors across the city. Overcrowding in a densely populated area with plenty of HMOs in the area, many are unregistered, parking, bins, dealing with multiple neighbours, long-term care of the property, etc. Let's not give in to the developers' strategies to get what they want, no matter what, and as if we can't see what they're doing. I'm asking you this evening to refuse this planning application for the same reasons that the committee did last November. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin, and thank you both for waiting this long. Any of the committee want to make any comments, please? Councillor Kerr.
Chair and committee, as before, this actually gives us an opportunity to improve the situation. In this case, we've seen, I think there's a photo being put up of the cycle parking, which in my view is not acceptable at the moment because it isn't covered, and it's actually of a nature that is very difficult for some cyclists to lock to effectively. Because you wish to lock your frame to it, not just a wheel, and some cycles will not be able to do that. And it certainly ought to be covered. So we have a condition there on both cycle and bin storage. I don't think that the current storage is acceptable, and I think that that can be tweaked in the final version of the condition. There was also a comment about bin storage and bin use, and that is quite a common problem with an element of antisocial behaviour with HMOs, and this again means that we've got more control over that aspect as well. So here we can clearly see that there is outdoor amenity space. It wouldn't take too much to be able to have a few chairs carried out from inside on a nice day. We just need that little bit more control, which we can get by passing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Rory, do you want to come back on any of those points, please?
Thank you. Just to clarify that the difference between this application and the previous one is mainly that the previous application was an application to change the use of the building from a single household dwelling, C3 dwelling, to an 8-person HMO, whereas this application is an application to change a 6-person HMO to an 8-person HMO.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that there is a slight difference there in that it's a change between 6 and 8 bedrooms as things stand at the moment, but the same issues as far as we've heard from Councillor Martin still exist. And so I think we do have to ask ourselves the question, what has changed? And a lot of those issues seem to be unresolved. So personally, I would support the decision that we made previously back in November, and for the same reasons, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rawson. Councillor Prosser.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be helpful or not at all. This is much harder than the last one, in that if I owned HMOs, I would be proud of this one. It looks fantastic. It's got lots of space in it. But at the same time, I have to agree with Councillor Martin. If we refused it 2 years ago, why would we consider agreeing to it now? It is just planning by stealth rather than actually, and those points are still valid. And it's a lovely project. It's a well done HMO. You wouldn't want to live anywhere better if you had to live in a HMO. But it's an overdevelopment problem that we have in this city. And the map that showed the HMOs in the area shows that you have similar, they're bigger houses, but a similar scale just south there of the application with HMO levels is what we were just looking at. The parking's slightly easier, the building's bigger, but the problem's the same. And I can't see, I struggle to see how we could just agree to this all the time. It's another stretch.
Ian, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to echo what Rory said and what the agent said, the difference is that this is a lawful 6-person HMO now, and as you can see, has been executed to a high standard, and it's now a proposal for an extra 2 people. So that's the difference, and so you need to focus your efforts on the current proposal. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Councillor Kerr.
I just want to comment on the layout of the street in that area, because although that particular property doesn't have any off-street parking, and nor do its immediate neighbours, there is actually off-street parking for the majority of properties on that road. There is problems with more intensive parking because it's not that far from the city centre and it is not that far from the university. But on the whole, people who are going out to work are not there during the day when the university is operating. So, it is not the same situation as we had in Alveston.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Somebody want to propose?
Yes, we can do that, Councillor Bolton. Yeah, we can improve that as you wish. Yeah, with the additional tightening of the cycle parking arrangement. Yeah.
Somebody like to move to the vote? Councillor Bolton, second, please. Councillor Kerr, can we go to the vote, please? All those in favour, including the condition that's just been set over the cycling provision. All those in favour?
4 in favour, Chair.
4 in favour. All those against?
5 against.
5 against. To come up with another reason.
I read out the reason. I don't know if that's.
You're not part of the committee, Councillor Martin. Good try. Good try. I know it's getting late, but I'm not that daft.
Can we use the reason that Councillor Martin said?
If you'd like to repeat it, then Councillor Prosser, that'd be fine.
I can't remember it.
Would you care?
Although it was as worded when it was rejected previously.
Send it.
Yeah, but
I've copied it from the documents submitted this evening, but I can read it out again if you like.
It's as printed in the report, but clearly, as we say, the proposal has changed. It is different to that context.
Councillor Evans.
Can I try this one? In the opinion of the local planning authority, the proposal would have a detrimental impact on the character of the immediate area and the residential amenities enjoyed by existing neighbours.
It is basically that.
It is that, yeah. But it carries on. It carries right down to it's GD5.
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah. It's
Item 7.1.
That's been used previously.
If the committee want to vote on the reason which is set out in the italics in item 7.1 on page 189, that would be your reason for rejection of this application. You started reading it, Councillor Evans, so you must have it in front of you. So if you're happy with that, we'll go to the vote on that one. So if that's your reason, all those in favour of that reason to reject the application?
5 again. 5, Chair.
That was 5, and all those against the reason for the...
4 again. 4 against.
4 against. So it has refused for that reason. Thank you. Thank you everybody for that one. Thank you, Councillor Martin. Thank you, Ms Dukes.
Or have somebody nominated to...
Oh, somebody nominated for the appeal, please.
If there is an appeal, that is.
Councillor Evans again. Councillor Evans, do you want to do that one as well, or Councillor Prosser on that one? Councillor Prosser, do you want me to nominate? I'll nominate you for that one then, Councillor Prosser. Yeah, you'll be all right on that one, Tim. Well done. You're good at this nominating. That's it for the applications. Potential site visits. Ian, it's over to you, please.
That's great. Okay, first one, Wilderslow House. Conversion, it's all forms right next to the Castle Ward redevelopment. You can see it from the public highway.
I think we all know where that is.
Yeah. Second one is the high school. This is just a variation of condition to do with the approved scheme. So it's a scheme we've granted. It's twiddling about with that, Chair. Another one, 137 Manor Road, Littleover, conversion thereof. Again, it's, you can see, I mean, it's on a busy stretch of carriageway, but you can see that from the public highway. Snelsmore Grange, reserve matters, it's pretty dry stuff, that one. I think the showstopper is this one, Chair. Frygate Goods Yard.
Yeah.
I think that's worth a wander round.
I think that's well worth a visit.
Yeah. So I'll get Julia. She ran off earlier, so we'll arrange something for that.
Great.
Okay. That's
Thanks,
it, Chair.
Ian.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everybody, for your contributions tonight. Best of luck with your appeals, Councillor Evans, Councillor Prosser. Best of luck. Stephen's not allowed to laugh at that one. But thank you very much, everybody. I know it's gone a long one, but thanks very much. Thanks to all the officers.